All right, I think we're about ready to go. I want to thank all the members of the media who are joining us as we get together for this press conference this afternoon, and the members of the community as well that are out there. I know media folks, you do have questions, and we're going to be here to answer all of those for you, as many as we can, time permitting. But before we get to that, the mayor would like to share more on what the city is doing, how the city of Portland is taking measures to ensure citywide resilience and recovery from the crises that we are all experiencing together. Mayor Wheeler.
We're in the midst of the most transformational period of our lifetime. Over the last 5 months, we've been rocked by 3 major challenges: a pandemic, a devastating recession, and a reckoning of our country's racist past. So first, I hope everybody with us today and everybody watching is safe. For decades, Portland has led the nation in so many different areas. We can do it again with the positive momentum created through the Black Lives Matter movement. But I need your help in rising to the occasion. This is ultimately about people. It's about us. It's about how all of us thrive in this community. If you were outside last weekend in Portland, Oregon, at a park, on a hike, on a bike ride, eating outdoors, enjoying the sun, physically distancing with your neighbors, then you know that the current national depiction of our city as a dark dystopia with nonstop violence is a lie. But we also have to be honest with ourselves, even as those around us, the president in particular, traffic in dishonesty and an attempt to stoke fear. The honesty is the acknowledgement that we as a city are helping to feed and fire the hysteria. We, and I put myself at the top of that list as the city's mayor, we have allowed our proud tradition of progressive protests to be stolen by a few dozen individuals engaged in violence and criminal destruction. They're intent on creating mayhem and attacking and harming people, not just property. That's a line that we can't allow our community to cross, not anymore. Enough is enough. It's time to rise up and to take immediate steps to repair and beautify our city. But again, I need the help of the entire community. We're in the midst of the worst public health crisis in a century, while at the same time, many of the residents of our city, our mostly white city, have exercised their free speech rights to peacefully protest structural racism in a way that makes me proud to be a Portlander. But these crises have also created an opening for violent extremists to do harm to our city, to scare our core downtown employers late at night, to wreak havoc in an effort to drain city resources, not in an effort to reinvest them. Rising up to decry structural racism is a noble cause. Pulling people from their vehicles and beating them in the streets is a horrific, violent crime. Rising up in support of peaceful assembly is a thing of beauty. Taking aim at fellow residents with violent words, threats, and actions is repugnant. Rising up to use our voices to seek change is a constitutionally protected honor that I'll defend till the day I die, even if it's directed at me. I can take the heat, it's part of the job. But now we must all rise up with a collective voice, with collective action, and condemn the violence and say simply this: it will not stand. Enough is enough. From protesters to police, we must rise up and virtually lock arms to end the violence so that we continue to make ourselves a stronger, better place by focusing on ending systematic racism, yes, even and especially within our criminal justice system. All violence, including police violence, is not the way to further the goals of our community. Portland is typically ranked as one of the most livable cities in the world, year after year. We have a strong brand. But if we're being truly honest with ourselves, we know that we have work to do to maintain and to ultimately restore and build upon our image. We need to end the nightly violence and implement much needed police reforms demanded by our community. We must rise up to do both. We must create a long-term plan to fight homelessness by focusing on ending chronic homelessness and reducing the number of tents on our city streets. This plan has to be compassionate on both sides, compassionate towards those individuals and families who have fallen on hard times due to economic or medical or other problems beyond their control, and compassionate towards those who have every right to insist that the sidewalks in front of their businesses and homes are clean and accessible. We must rise up to do both. We must clean up the damage and the defacement of our downtown buildings, especially near the Justice Center. But we also must protect the beautiful murals and artwork produced in response to the killing of George Floyd. We must rise up and do both. Finally, we must do better to build upon the lifestyle that have attracted people from all around the world to join us here in the city of Portland. That means everything from better schools to cleaner air to cleaner streets, more tolerance, more compromise. We will not be able to do this if we take a my way or the highway approach or adopt a not in my backyard stance. Rising up to be the best Portland that we can be will require a certain amount of compromise from all of us. But what can't be compromised day in and day out is the hard work required to make Portland a better place. I'm committed to leading better, to lead more visibly, to put down actual benchmarks that we as a city must hit over the coming months and years. Here's how we start. I will meet again with the police tonight to observe and discuss how we can best protect our peaceful demonstrators and prevent others from stealing their important message with lawlessness and cruelty. And I'm going to ask them what new ideas can they bring to the table and how can we hold ourselves accountable in real time, not just after months of exploration or investigation, but in real time. As for the business community, I'll meet tomorrow with key stakeholders to adopt common sense measures that we can take to clean up and re-landscape the few city blocks that have been the most impacted. It's time to do this. We're going to work hand in hand with local employers to restore their confidence and help defray the costs of their improvements. And I look forward to announcing several initiatives to begin proactively addressing the eviction crisis that so many Portlanders and Americans are facing in the coming weeks, especially during this pandemic. And unfortunately, those evictions are only anticipated to accelerate as we move forward. The other night, as I was biking near my home on a beautiful Portland evening, I was struck by how many restaurants and bars are open and how many people were walking along with their masks on, walking their dogs, and how the spirit of the city seems so capable of linking arms and continuing to make this a better place for all. The city belongs to all of us. It's our home. And it's time that we rise up and take seriously the parts that need fixing and address those issues now. In the coming days, I'll be offering my own solutions to how we meaningfully engage the community on much needed police reforms and how we support business recovery. But I didn't want to wait until tomorrow for the details. I wanted to be here today. I needed to be here today. Tomorrow, expect to hear more from me and in the days to come. And now I'll take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Okay, reporters, we ask that you do the hand raise icon. Click on that. I see them starting to pop up, and I will start right in with the first question. Rebecca Ellis from OPB. Do you have a question for the mayor?
Hey, Rebecca from OPB. Can you explain to me a little more what you mean when you say you're going to meet with the police tonight? Is that the police chief? Is that the command center? And what exactly will you be asking of them?
I will be asking them specifically, what immediate reforms can we put on the table to show faith with the public, that we are hearing the public, that we understand the public, that we acknowledge that while the men and women of our police bureau work hard, they can do better. All of us can, that they're an evolving organization, and that they will join us, that they will rise up, that they will link arms with all of us who are interested in addressing the issues that people in this community have been asking for, not just during the last 3 months of demonstrations, but what they've been asking for a long, long time. I'm also interested in the question of accountability. As you know, when somebody files a complaint with the Independent Police Review Commission, it can be months or sometimes even years before people hear back. That just isn't acceptable. It doesn't sit well with me, and it doesn't sit well with people in the public. I think we need to figure out, how are we going to hold our officers accountable in real time? And those are the two questions I'm posing tonight.
Sorry there, folks. The old mute button trick got it to me. Let's go with Lisa Balick from Coin TV. Lisa?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. One thing it seems that you haven't addressed, though, is the ongoing violence. People say they're not coming back to work, shop, visit downtown. Neighborhoods are under siege. It's not safe. What will you do to stop the violence other than saying it's bad?
Well, we've already done more than just say it's bad. Obviously, the first thing we need to do, and my call to action tonight, is for all of us in this community to come together and say that we do not tolerate the violence, that we want it to end. We want to get about the business of cleaning up our community, of investing in our community, of restoring the confidence of employers in our community to be able to let people come back to the downtown area in particular and reopen. And in order to do that, I need to work with the police bureau to both, on one hand, create respectful place for nonviolent demonstrations to take place, and on the other hand, enact strategies that make it clear that we are going to arrest and hold accountable that small group of people who are engaged in the nightly violence. It has gone on way too long. They need to hear from all of us in the community, not just me as the mayor. I'm asking everybody in this community to help me on this. I'll do my part as a leader, but I need other people to speak up as well and say this violence is not condoned, this violence is not tolerated, and we will do everything we can to hold those accountable who are engaged in it. And also, you know, I want to hear from the police. What more do they need from us in terms of support? I'm open to their ideas.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Let's go with Everton Bailey from the Oregonian. Everton, you have a question for the mayor?
Thank you very much. Mayor, thank you very much for the time. You mentioned in a statement on Monday that you would be discussing with Chief Lavelle the Police Bureau's strategy during the weekend right-wing rally and counter demonstrations. Did that discussion happen, and what came from that conversation, if it did?
The discussion did happen. The answer that was proffered was that we did not have enough personnel on duty at that particular time to be able to safely engage and make targeted arrests. That begets other questions that I have, which is, why didn't we have more personnel? What is the state of our relationship with other law enforcement agencies around the state and around the region? And are we planning adequately for the resources that we think we're going to need?
Okay, thank you, Everton. Nigel Jaquis with the Willamette Week. Nigel, you have a question for the mayor?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So some of the video from Saturday showed at least one of the right-wing protesters openly brandishing a gun, maybe more than one. I want to contrast that with the nightly videos that we've seen often of police officers knocking down or aggressively arresting unarmed protesters. I'd like to hear your reaction to seeing your police officers standing by as people openly brandish guns, and contrast that with what we've seen on a nightly basis from your police officers.
Yeah, well, here's the deal. And again, I want to say, I work very closely with the police bureau. I am empathetic towards the work that the men and women who've been standing out there every single night have been doing for 3 months. But Nigel, nobody can look at those videos and say it doesn't raise a whole bunch of questions. It is clearly unacceptable for somebody in a crowd to brandish a gun. I've done some research. It's my understanding that while people, if they have their proper permits, they can certainly open carry or conceal carry. That is allowed under the law, but under no circumstances are they allowed to point their firearms at people unless they can demonstrate an imminent threat. That's my understanding, as it was related to me by people who understand the law. And so my point about having more real-time accountability is the way this works is a complaint will go to IPR and I will get no more feedback as the police commissioner because I am part of the due process. And I won't hear anything more on that case until it goes through the IPR process and the internal police review process. And it could be months or longer before I have any information that I can then share with the public. And that just doesn't sit well with me because the images themselves raise incredible questions about whether or not we are being effective, whether we are making arrests on a timely basis, whether I and other members of the city council are providing the police bureau the resources they need to make those arrests. But I think all of us can agree there is no circumstance under which that is acceptable or appropriate in the middle of a crowd when tensions are already high to be brandishing a firearm. That makes no sense to me, none whatsoever.
All right, Pat Doris, KGW, you have a question?
Thank you. Two-part question, Mayor. You talk about people rising up, and so I'm wondering, what does that mean? Are you literally calling on people to come out of their homes and apartments and condominiums and stand in front of government buildings and turn the protesters away? That's thing one. And then thing two, how do you hold those violent protesters accountable when the district attorney is not pressing charges? Last night, 23 people were arrested. Most of them had those charges that the DA says he won't prosecute.
As people know about me, I do not support violence. I do not support violence from residents in the community, and I do not support violence from the police or anywhere else. Violence is not the solution to this particular movement. And so from my perspective, I think it's important that we continue as a community to voice our clear expectation that we support those who are peacefully, nonviolently demonstrating in support of racial justice and equity and police reform. And we clearly state that we as a community do not support the kind of criminal violence and destruction that we've seen in our community over the course of the last month. And I also want to direct people to a study that was talked about in the New York Times this morning that shows that nonviolent demonstration since the murder of George Floyd has had a significant impact both on the public's perception about the need for racial equity and justice and police reform and the number of concrete reforms that have been put on the table. Nonviolent demonstration works. And so when I say rise up, I don't mean people literally have to go out to the streets and stand in front of those places where violence might be taking place. In fact, I don't recommend that. But I do ask people to not be passive in this time. This is a moment where we all have to be accountable. We all have a role to play in this historic moment. The issues at stake are weighty, whether it's coming together as a community to improve the opportunities for all of us to thrive in this community, or whether it's addressing some of the issues around COVID, or whether it's working together to help support our small employers throughout this city. We all have a role to play. And so when I say rise up, I'm saying let's come together as a community and let's speak with the voice that we know we have. We have a proud history of demonstration and counter demonstration here, but peaceful demonstration and counter demonstration. And we also have this incredible ability as a community to come together and put innovative ideas on the table to solve our problems. That's where I'd love to see our energy directed. And for those few people who are engaged in more violent activity, look, I don't agree with you. I don't condone under any circumstance the violence that you're engaged in. I still want to hear from you. I want to know what's driving it. I want to know how I can understand the anger, the frustration, the rage, the hurt, whatever is driving it. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to help address in a concrete way some of those issues too. So I'd love to hear what specific strategies you are suggesting we employ. And so those are the things I'm talking about when I say rise up. I'm saying let's virtually link arms. Let's come back together as a community. Let's defy the division that we're seeing nationally and say, look, Portland can do better. We have a leadership role to play. We can do some great things here, but we also have to acknowledge we've screwed some things up. As the mayor of the city, I take personal responsibility for not being here earlier, not working more closely with the community, not finding ways to address these important issues. But going forward, each and every day, I'm going to do my part to lead, and I'm asking the community, everyone in the community, to join me and help me, work with me to solve these problems facing all of us collectively.
All right, thank you. Jamie Goldberg with the Oregonian. Jamie?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you doing this. You met, I think, at the end of July with the Portland Business Alliance to discuss some plans to restoring businesses, especially in the downtown and central city area. And I know that you had also had a plan, your office has been circulating a plan that had target areas, including public safety, addressing homelessness, graffiti, cleaning up trash, and a retail strategy. I think that there's been some concern from businesses that they haven't seen any action related to that yet. So I want to know if there's a timeline for implementing specific strategies to help these businesses, particularly in downtown. And then additionally, what business, you mentioned meeting with members of the business community tomorrow. Who are you meeting with?
Yeah, and thank you. And the list is an open list. And if there are employers listening to this who want to participate or community leaders who want to participate, we want you. I'll work with anybody who will work with me on these issues. In terms of the details, we're going to have specifics coming out in the next couple of days, but I can tell you the broad categories. The broad categories are how do we help businesses and what resources do we have, whether it's helping support businesses that have had uninsured losses, whether it's sharing the cost of helping to clean the graffiti off of their storefronts, whether it's working with them to create more of a buzz with regard to the opportunities downtown like we did after the August 17 demonstrations. We worked with the business community and found discounts. We did a marketing campaign throughout the suburbs to bring people back and show them what was available. We provided free parking in our downtown to get people to come back to downtown. Those are just some of the ideas that we're working through, but I know there's other ideas out there too, because I hear them each and every day, and I want to fast track this. So in the coming days, you'll hear more details. Though we know this, the precondition is stopping the nightly violence and cleaning up the downtown area.
Thank you, Jamie. Dana Haynes, you have your hand raised with the Portland Tribune.
Sorry about that, muted. Two questions, Mr. Mayor. First, with whom in the police are you meeting tonight? Is it the chief, the union leadership, the rank and file? And secondly, what do you need to hear from them? Are you looking for a mea culpa, for an admission that the police have contributed to the crisis? In this meeting tonight, what do you need to hear to make it a success?
I need to hear solutions.
Dana, do you have a follow-up?
Well, no, sir. I was wondering if anything specific other than solutions?
Yeah. Again, what I'd like to hear from our police bureau is, number one, are there more resources they need from other elected leaders, myself included, in order to bring this to a peaceful conclusion? Number two, what can we do to address some of the concerns that have been expressed by members of the media, by members of the public, to hold ourselves accountable in real time? I think those are the two really important areas that we need to talk about. What resources do they need to be successful? What ideas do they have that they would like to put on the table that they have not put on the table? How do we work with the community in a meaningful way? And how do we hold ourselves accountable, not by just saying, oh, IPR will take care of it in a year, they'll get back to you. We need to hold ourselves accountable right now. The public demands immediate action, and I demand immediate action. And so I want to work with the leaders in the Portland Police Bureau to help us get to those solutions.
All right, thank you. Drew Reeves, KPTV. And again, reporters, if you have a question, please hit the hand raise icon so I know who out there wants to ask a specific question.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, so tonight you're meeting with police, tomorrow you're meeting with business leaders. You say that in the coming days, you're going to be coming up with specific points. Why has this taken 90 days to happen?
I've been trying to do too much, and I've been trying to do it alone. We have, as I indicated, three different major issues facing the community simultaneously: COVID, the economic crisis, the recovery required there, the demands for racial justice and equity and police reforms. And on top of that, we have a city budget crisis. And frankly, I have not been focused enough on the two issues that are the most important to the city of Portland. And right now, that is ending the nightly violence and getting our community back on its feet. And number two, it's about economic recovery, both for our households and our small businesses. I need to focus like a laser beam on those two issues. So the first thing I've done is I've tried to do too much. And the second mistake I've made is I've tried to do it alone. I don't believe I've asked the community enough or in the right way to engage with me to help me solve these problems. Look, I'll lead the way I can, but I can't do it alone. I need everybody's help in this community. And so that's part of why I'm here tonight, to say, look, the only way we're going to do this is we are going to rise up as a community. That's how we're going to get through these crises. And I know we can do it. And I know other cities are struggling with exactly these same issues, but let's put Portland in a leadership role. Let's come together. Let's think collectively. Let's innovate together. Let's think about how everybody in this community can thrive going forward together, whether it's around making sure that our communities are safe for everybody, making sure that people have access to economic opportunity, making sure people have access to the housing they need, access to healthcare, access to recreational opportunities. There's so many ways that this city could do so much better than we are today. And I'm asking everybody to come together and help me do it.
Okay, Blair Stenvick, Portland Mercury. You have a question?
Hi. So protesters are calling for total police abolition. Is it possible we're past the point where talking about the idea of piecemeal reform that is okay by the police will fix things? And would you be willing to talk seriously about things like substantial defunding of PPB if that will get the protests to end?
Well, I've been on the record as not supporting complete defunding of the police. I mean, look, we get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of calls every year through 911. And before we get rid of the current public safety system and all of its infrastructure, I need to know what the landing pad is. What are we replacing it with? So if we're talking about total abolition, I don't think that is a realistic goal. I really don't. And it's especially not a realistic goal in the near term. But there are many specific ways that I think we can work with the community to get rid of the bias and the institutional racism that still exists in policing nationally and, of course, locally. And you know, I'm going to do my part to help with that. And my colleagues on the city council, they're going to do their part to help with that. We're finding meaningful ways to engage with different voices in the community who have different ideas. And again, I'm willing to meet with anybody. I'm willing to talk to anybody. I'm willing to keep an open mind. But at this particular moment, nobody's made a good case for me that a complete abolition of funding for policing will enable somebody who calls 911 at 3 in the morning to get an actual response. We still have that responsibility and that duty to help our community be safe. And for me, it's widening the lens. Everybody needs to feel safe. And we've heard from so many people in the community that they're even afraid to call for a police response. And that's telling. A lot of people don't trust the police. And that's not an indictment of the police or an indictment of me. That is a statement that we've got to do better. We don't have the trust of everybody in this community, and that's for good reason. And we have to be honest enough to own it and say, look, we'll do better. The public is telling us what they want in terms of safety and what they want from their police bureau. And it's our job to deliver. But I don't support just completely getting rid of the police bureau. I don't see what you would replace that with, especially in the near term.
Okay, we're winding down. Got time for just a few more questions. And let's go next with Julia Silverman from Portland Monthly. Julia? Water break time.
Thanks very much for taking the questions, Mayor Wheeler. I have a two-parter. Number one, you've said you're meeting with business groups and with police. Why not try to set up a meeting with protest leaders? A very decentralized movement. And number two, I'm wondering if you think, it's a more of a philosophical question, if you think what's gone on in Portland this summer is going to redefine us nationally and even internationally for years to come in the way that, say, what happened in Little Rock in 1957 did there?
So first, let me acknowledge that I have met with many demonstration leaders, including as recently as today. And I get feedback from demonstration leaders. My staff meets with demonstration leaders, but I've spent a considerable amount of time myself meeting with people and hearing their needs. Some of those meetings have been really productive and helpful and have caused me to think about how we could potentially change or improve our systems. Some of those meetings have not been particularly successful, but look, they're all my constituents, and I look forward to meeting anybody with any ideas who think they can help us move beyond this and achieve some of the goals that people in this community are saying they want us to achieve. I represent the institution of governance. It's my job to listen, to understand, to reflect, and support those ideas that I can support. And I'll continue to do that. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Wait. Sorry, am I muted? There we go. The second part of my question was whether you think this will, what's happened in Portland this summer will redefine our image nationally or even internationally for years to come. Similar
So
to
the concern I have is that people are trying to redefine our city for us. Portland is front and center with a handful of other Democratic cities in the Republican National Convention this week. We play a prominent role on Fox News. The New York Times ran an editorial, excuse me, not the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal ran an editorial the other day that was just full of factual misinformation. So other people are trying to define the city of Portland, and what they're doing is they're showing the nightly violence and they're blowing it up as though that's the entirety of this city. And those of us who are actually here, who are in Portland, we know that we have work to do to reduce the nightly violence, but we also know it is not all encompassing. It is not the entirety of the city, and the city's not, by and large, in chaos. But that does not in any way excuse us from taking the steps we need to take to own the violence that does exist and address that violence and work with our local employers to help them get back up on their feet and help their employees and their customers feel safe coming downtown. And we'll continue to do that. Will it hurt the brand? Of course it hurts the brand. There's no question that when night after night after night, you're the lead on Fox News, or the President of the United States is tweeting about chaos in your community, that can't be good. So what I want to do is, on one hand, address the violence that we are responsible for in the areas where it does exist, work with our community to address the concerns that they are expressing through the BLM movement and through their, I believe, important movement around this reckoning around racial justice and equity, and work with our other people in the community to help clean the community up, spruce it up, get reopened, and help people get back to work to the degree that they can in the midst of this COVID crisis. A lot of families are hurting, and the nightly violence isn't helping.
All right, literally just two more. We're going to go with Nick Budnick, first from the Tribune. Nick, go ahead.
Thank you for the time, Mayor Wheeler. You have sounded similar messages in the past, and you also tonight talked about how perhaps you haven't been asking the right way. As you know, you're in a 5-mayor form of government, or so it's been called, and I wonder, please describe what efforts you've made, if any, to reach out to your fellow commissioners to ask them to join you in addressing your perception of the problems, and what responses you've received.
Yeah, good, thank you. And I generally do not share the details of my one-on-one conversations with my colleagues, but I'll tell you this. We communicate regularly, both in person and through text messages. I believe I have a really good relationship with my colleagues. That does not mean we always agree. In fact, we have some noticeable differences from time to time, and I think that's healthy, and it's a sign of a solid democracy that we can have these disagreements, but we still come together on important issues. And you saw us do it. We made some incremental reforms to our police bureau early on in this crisis. Commissioner Hardesty and I and our colleagues referred a police oversight and accountability measure to the November ballot. Together, we have all staked out a claim around improving how we create safety for the community, which doesn't always mean sending in a police officer. Sometimes it's about resources for support for families or for housing, or helping people find on-ramps to employment opportunities or job training. All of those things are related to public safety too. So I would say that our relationships are good. We certainly have differences of opinion on what the next steps should be specifically around police reform activities. And that's why the community has to play a key role. We're only 4 people right now. And soon when Dan Ryan joins us in a couple of weeks, we'll be 5, but we're 5 people in a city with 700,000 residents. So we need to find those ways to engage the community in a meaningful way. And my suspicion, just knowing my constituents, is they're going to have all kinds of ideas all across the spectrum. And it's our job to hear and understand and engage and take the best ideas that we can that are workable and put them into effect. And I also want to say this, we sometimes forget to mention the police bureau as an active, engaged partner in this. I speak to many, many people in the police bureau who understand this imperative, this mandate for changing the way that policing takes place in America, and they support it. And so they're going to be a critical partner in this as well.
Okay, last question. We are out of time basically, but we'll take one more, and that would go to Bridget Chavez.
If you want, I can take as many questions as people have.
Okay, well, we got time then. So Bridget, your hand's up. There she is.
There we go. Can you hear me okay? Yes, Mayor, you talked about the violence happening at the protests. What about the increase in gun violence we're seeing? I mean, July, we saw the the most shootings in 30 years, 150 rounds fired into an apartment building, and people say they're scared. A lot of it, they mentioned the gun violence reduction team being gone, but you haven't replaced it with anything. You talked about a landing pad earlier. So do you have a plan specifically for what to do about that piece of this?
Yes, I am absolutely appalled by the level of gun violence that we're seeing in the city of Portland. We had a record number of shootings in the city of Portland in July. And I have no reason to believe that August will be any different. And for those of us who say that we are concerned about Black lives, this is a direct question that we need to address in our community that significantly impacts BIPOC families in our community. And we have changed things around. The Chief Lavelle has added 7 people to the unit that have specifically been detailed with following up on every one of these gun violence situations so that every family, that every case gets the attention it needs. Nike Green, who leads my Office of Violence Prevention, has put together a proposal for the Portland City Council that will include new FTE to work with our community partners to help support them in their efforts to reach out to people in the community who are the most likely to be impacted by gun violence. And that's a proven strategy. And I will ask my colleagues on the Portland City Council to support funding for that. And we're also going to continue to work not only with our existing partners in the community, but we're encouraging the development of new partners in the community who have contacts, connections, lived experience with those who are engaged in or impacted by gun violence. What's happening is there's just no way to put it. It's horrific and heartbreaking to see what's happening to so many families in this community. And I'll tell you, one of the hardest things about being mayor of Portland during this time is meeting with the loved ones of people who've been lost to gun violence. And it is every bit as front and center to me as any other issue that we're facing as a community. And I'm just so grateful for Nike Green and her strong leadership on this and the advice and counsel that she gives to me and my team to help us be able to get this put together in a way we want to.
Okay, Nick Budnick, you have a follow-up question. I only see 2 hands left, so, oh, there's a couple more now, but go ahead, Nick.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Mayor, it seems like you're, I guess I was maybe too subtle with my question or wasn't direct enough, but it seems like you're alone here. You've been alone in making this plea. And I guess, is that because you're not doing enough to get people to stand with you on the council? Or are they just not sharing your view of what needs to happen?
Nick, great question, and I'm sorry I didn't quite understand it the way it was originally asked. I don't blame anybody else except myself. I'm the mayor. I'm the leader of this city. And ultimately, if people aren't standing with me, it's because I have not asked them in the right way, or I haven't put the right value proposition in front of them. So I'm standing here tonight asking in a different way. And the way I'm asking tonight is I'm saying, look, first of all, I need to focus more on the crisis facing our city, whether it's the gun violence, whether it's the demonstrations that have the violent part of the demonstrations that we've seen on a nightly basis, whether it's working to have a COVID recovery that supports our households and supports our local businesses. I need to focus on those things. And you'll hear more about that specifically in the coming days. And second of all, I don't think I have asked the community in the right way to stand with me. And I was really proud of the way the community stood with me before the August 17th demonstrations. We had over 120 organizations in a coalition, and a lot of those organizations don't necessarily always agree with me or each other, but we stood together as a community, and it made national news because people said, wow, look at this, Portland with its diversity of perspectives and viewpoints, they're standing clearly against violence. And that hasn't happened recently. And I don't blame anybody else except myself. I'm the leader. It's my responsibility. If it hasn't happened, it's because I didn't ask the right way. So now I'm asking. I need people in this community, everybody in this community, to work with me.
Okay, next, Nat Moon, you have a question?
Yes, hi there. Thank you so much, Mayor Wheeler. I wanted to ask about the recent policy by Portland Police to slash the tires of vehicles near protests. A few questions here. What is the purpose of this policy? Who has authorized the policy? And how does it help with dispersal to have disabled vehicles in the road blocking the demonstrators? Thank you.
I would defer to the Portland Police Bureau for details, but I can tell you in broad brushstrokes what they told me. Number one, the vehicles were between the police and the demonstrators. It created a safety hazard. Number two, they needed to disable the vehicles, and they felt the fastest way to do it was to poke holes in the tires. It obviously isn't a great look, but that's the reasoning that was behind it, and that policy is of course being reviewed. But I would encourage you to follow up with PBP specifically on that.
Okay, next question. We just got two left. Everton circling back for a follow-up. Everton Bailey. Everton, you there? Your hand is raised. Okay, how about Blair Stenbeck? Blair, you have a follow-up question?
Oh, sorry, I was waiting to be unmuted. Sorry about that. Mayor, thanks for sticking around. So I got two questions. I'll try to make them quick. Mayor, you've said that you're willing to meet with anyone to hear them out. And so I was wondering if there are any plans to meet with the average citizen or non-protest leaders through any kind of public forum or anything of that nature. And then my second question is, in your recent meetings with protest leaders, what is your understanding of what demonstrators need to see from the city in order to feel that nightly protests won't be necessary?
Thank you. And that was Everton?
Yes.
Sounded like Everton.
Yes.
Everton, thank you for the questions. First of all, what we need in terms of public engagement, the City Council and I are already in discussions about how that would look. We obviously want to create meaningful public engagement as opposed to window dressing public engagement. We want to find ways for people who we've never heard from before to be able to come and feel that their voice is being heard and respected and understood by us. We want to create opportunities for people to give us feedback. We have not finalized those plans, but that is something that all of us on the City Council are highly motivated to develop very quickly. You will be hearing more about that after Labor Day when things kick up again. But I absolutely am committed to a public and transparent process as we move forward. If it's not public and it's not accessible and it's not transparent, it won't have legitimacy, and therefore it will not do anything to convince the public that they're being heard. With regard to meeting with demonstration leaders, what are their demands? Honestly, there are lots of people demonstrating and they have different demands. And I've heard from some demonstrators who have put on the table very specific reforms. The Oregon Reformation Project, for example, I've been actively participating in those conversations, and they're creating a long list of very specific ideas that could help us move forward on a broad spectrum of issues related to racial justice and equity and shared prosperity. I've met with even some demonstrators who I would describe as being more on the extreme side of the spectrum. I had a meeting last week where a group of people frankly just shouted expletives at me. That was how they wanted to use their time. I had to end it a little prematurely because my daughter was in the room. But sometimes people just want to be heard. They want to vent. I met with a gentleman this morning who had a bunch of very thoughtful ideas. I didn't agree with all of them, but I agreed with many of the ideas he put on the table. And we had an opportunity to really have a back and forth and challenge each other's assumptions and challenge each other's ideas about where some of those reforms might lead. But it has to happen in a broader setting. If I just am meeting with small groups of people or demonstration leaders or meeting with people one-on-one, the public isn't really engaged in or participating in that broader conversation. And so they're not hearing it, they're not learning from it, they're not gaining any further understanding. So I think what we really need to do is find these ways for broader public engagement. That could include forums, that could include work groups, that could include meetings in the neighborhoods where we talk to people in smaller groups and put some very specific proposals or supposals on the table for people's consideration. And I hope it isn't just the Portland City Council. I hope this is something we're engaged in with local leadership throughout the region. And I hope that the private sector and the philanthropic and nonprofit sector continue to be highly engaged on these issues, because they all have a role to play in it as well. This isn't just a movement about community and government. This is a broader question about how everybody in this community can thrive. And so I'm going to do my part to help create those opportunities.
Okay, we haven't heard yet from Jacqueline Abad, Coin TV. Jacqueline, you have a question for the mayor?
Hi, Mayor Ted Wheeler. Thanks again for taking time. Every night we've seen demonstrators gathering or marching to city and county buildings. Yesterday they went to City Hall, as we all know. As people again gather tonight, what is your message to them?
My message is to be peaceful. And again, we're in a city that respects First Amendment rights. We're in a city with a long history of demonstration and counter demonstration, but violence is not helping get the message across. All the violence does is leads to a lot of stories the next day about violence. It doesn't get to the broader issues of racial justice or equity or BLM, in my personal opinion. And now there's increasing evidence that nonviolent demonstration is actually more effective in terms of getting the point across and leading to the changing of hearts and minds and policy. So my advice to people would be peaceful.
All right, one more. Blair Stenvik, you have a follow-up for the mayor?
Okay, so you said before you don't think total abolition is a realistic goal. So back in June, during the budget process, people were calling for a $50 million budget cut and have that money redirected to fund other things. Given the fact that protests have now lasted almost 100 days and Portland's brand is on the line, do you perhaps see that step as realistic?
I cannot in good faith simply take an arbitrary number and say we have reformed policing or we've achieved racial justice by cutting the Bureau by X dollars. That doesn't necessarily move the dime. What I want to do is have a public safety system that includes more than just police response, but includes on-ramp education to job training, to shared economic prosperity, to stable housing, to true healthcare systems that support the most vulnerable in our community. So I get the investment side, and that's really attractive to me. We should be investing in all of those things, by the way, including substance abuse and mental health, because that would also help us address some of the other critical issues in our community. But to do it by simply saying we're going to eviscerate the funding for the Portland Police Bureau at a time when the public still is demanding services from the Portland Police Bureau, I don't think is a responsible or even a logical response. That's my personal view, and I'm certainly willing to hear people's perspectives and opinions, but as of the time when we looked at this during the budget process, I didn't see compelling evidence that that would necessarily lead to a safer community. In fact, as somebody mentioned a few minutes ago, we have a significant gun violence issue in the city of Portland. And further cutting back on the resources that could help us address that significant gun violence issue, I don't see how that necessarily leads to more safety in the near term. So if we're talking about a truly radical reformation of policing, you're talking about a cultural change. You're talking about making sure that other systems of care, which are not currently adequately supported or funded by any level of government, are supported, making sure that people have the stable housing, making sure that the state of Oregon has a viable mental health and care delivery system, making sure that we have on-demand substance abuse treatment. And we have none of those things. So simply taking 50 million out of the police bureau, which would be a huge hit to the police bureau, and putting it to all of these systems of care where it would be a proverbial drop in the bucket and probably not move the dial at all, doesn't make sense to me. But I'll keep an open mind, and I've changed my mind before, and I'll be open to different perspectives.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're coming up right on 6 o'clock high. It has been a full hour, and we certainly thank the mayor for his time and for thank all of you.
Tim, did everybody get their questions answered?
Yes,
I'm
they
willing to
did.
stay longer if people
No,
have
we
more
made sure
questions.
everybody's got their questions answered.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap it up at this point. And again, thank you, everybody, for your questions. And if you have any other follow-ups, you know how to reach me. You have my address. So thank you all and have a good evening.
Thank you.